Well, we continue. We have 2 original plays that were written for this. One is a very personal retrospective on this theme of change and transformation. And that will be offered by 3 readers who have combined to share a perspective. And following the retrospective, we will hear 2 piano movements composed especially for this day and inspired by the writings of Baha'u'llah. The first of the piano movements is entitled Clouds in My Eyes. Clouds are mentioned in the Baha'i writings as a symbol for the things that obscure man's vision and that obscure his vision and prevent him from recognizing God when God brings his messenger to earth. God's manifestation, which he also symbolizes as the sun shining on the horizon. And the second one is entitled The Healer. And this honors Baha'u'llah's, Baha'u'llah has referred to himself as the divine physician who had his fingers on the pulse of humanity and who diagnosed the ills and the needs for this age. And then to conclude, we will see a short and really fun children's play that portrays how transformation reaches all the way down to the level of atoms. Baha'u'llah said that in every age and cycle, God has created all things, and that not a single atom can be found that does not declare the evidences of his might. Keep those words in mind, and use your imagination when we reach the final play with children, entitled The Wonder of Atoms. Thank you.
The last year and a half has been quite a challenge for my family and myself. My husband and my best friend Stuart died very early in the afternoon on February 17th, 2016. He was a most outstanding person. That afternoon, Stuart lost his 28-year relationship to cancer, his soul separated from his body moving to the world of dust, and his soul continuing to progress into the spiritual worlds of God. At least that's how the Baha'i faith views death, and I agree. At first, his death seemed so final. I wanted his body back to talk to hug, to love. What was left for me without him being able to talk to me, to hold my hand again, to laugh with him, to create theater with, to help me solve problems, to always have my back. We were married for 52 years, and we had 2 children and 6 wonderful grandchildren. Stuart and I were like a spontaneous combustion. We exploded together in creativity and in conflict. Especially in conflict when we were young, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but we were young till about age 55. It was then that I began in earnest a spiritual journey that has continued with me to this day.
I too have been married for a long time, 36 years, and I've raised 2 sons, and also I have 2 grandchildren. I grew up in a family with many challenges and many joys. However, when I was young and in college, I began to feel kind of lost and had no confidence in myself. But then I had an unusual experience with my brother.
In my life, like everyone else, I faced many trials and tests. In my family, there was mental illness, a suicide, physical illnesses, and death. There was also my father, who provided me with a model of courage, insight, and eternal optimism. Without these learning experiences and difficulties, I might not ever have gotten into such a state of pain. However, at age 55, I was filled with a desire to grow and change, a feeling so desperate that it could not be ignored. I began to seek another way to view the world, another way to be in the world. I began to attend therapy. I went to many churches and spiritual groups, and I read constantly. Why was I living? How could I contribute to the world? And what was my life's purpose? My father wanted my two brothers and I to grow up without being indoctrinated into any one religion. And so, when we were young, we were introduced to many religions so that when we grew up, we would have the freedom to choose what we wanted to believe in.
One must remember that the purpose of life is to prepare the soul for the next life, the universal house of justice. In this world, man, must prepare himself for the life beyond. That which he needs in the world of the kingdom must be obtained here. Man is born naked, and when he is dead, he's also naked. He brings nothing with him to this world, and when he departs, he cannot take anything physical to the next. But whatever he has given to the cause of God, while on this earth, his time, his labors, his resources, as well as his services to his fellow human beings, these he can take with him to the spiritual realms. This is one way of transforming something which belongs to the world of matter into the spiritual worlds of God.
I began my before I began my spiritual journey, this is how I viewed the world. When people criticized me, to protect myself, I must immediately lash back in anger, burst into tears, or run into another room. Also, as I look around, I seem to have it so much worse than everyone else. You know, I'm not sure if anyone really loves me. I feel anxious, afraid. I don't like to be alone. And I guess I feel guilty. You know, I think it's my job to teach everyone around me how to behave. I have special talents. Maybe you didn't know that, but I do. And of course that means I'm always right. I always give so much to other people. And you know what? They don't even appreciate it. How could there be a God if so many painful things have happened to my family and myself? I have to control all things in order to make things happen the way I want them to happen. And of course, other people really should be trying to make me happy all the time. I must confess, these perceptions did not work out too well in my life.
Oh God, refresh and gladden my spirit, purify my heart, illumine my powers. I lay all my affairs in thy hand. Thou art my guide and my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be a happy and joyful being. Oh God, I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will I let trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. Oh God, thou art more friend to me than I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, O Lord, Abdul Baha.
When I was 55, my husband and I were separated for 9 months. We'd been going through a number of difficulties for quite a while, and I wanted change. I moved to New York City, and while living there, after a while, I came to the conclusion that I had really always been lucky, but I just didn't know it. I had always expected it was Stuart's job to make me happy. One day it occurred to me that perhaps that was my job. What's more, in spite of our difficulties, Stuart had loved me more and longer than anyone else in my life. He was loyal, he was honest, he was a wonderful person with the highest possible character. Could it be that there were some things I needed to change? After 9 months, I left New York City and I went home to Stuart with a new mission to help heal our relationship. And guess what he said to me? He said, "I would have waited for you forever." That was the day I discovered what humility was, what real love was. I was humbled by his amazing spirit of forgiveness and love, and I thought about that for a long, long time.
There were 7 of us in my family. One of my 5 brothers is schizophrenic, and it was this brother that had a profound influence on my life. Back when I was in college, he and I were hanging out together, and when out of the blue and for no apparent reason, he said, "There will be peace," and he gave me a book on Buddhism. For some reason, this statement in that book affected me so deeply that I began a spiritual search. I found that there was a connection between Buddhism and Christianity, and in fact, between all religions. That insight eventually led me to the Baha'i faith. Even so, it took me 32 years to find true confidence in myself. And you know, I have to thank Baha'u'llah and his writings for helping me gain that confidence. In the process of investigating truth for myself, I began to see that I could feel the authenticity of the Baha'i faith's founding principles and that have led the world into an age of maturity.
Baha'u'llah has written, "All men have been created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. The virtues and attributes pertaining unto God are all evident and manifest and described in the heavenly books. Among them are trustworthiness, truthfulness, purity of heart while communing with God, forbearance, resignation to whatever the Almighty hath decreed, contentment with things his will hath provided, patience, nay, thankfulness in the midst of tribulation, and complete reliance in all circumstances upon him."
Sometimes as I gaze out of my window and think about what's happening in the world, I feel a deep sadness because our human struggles are so sensationalized and dramatized on radio and TV. One could easily come to the conclusion that in reality, humanity is on a downward spiral. But then I began to think of all the positive spiritual progress that is taking place, often going unrecognized because it's so ordinary. I believe that the principles and energy of the Baha'i faith, which was amazingly progressive and revolutionary when the Bab and Baha'u'llah came into the world, has and will continue to bring about the spiritual growth that this world so sorely needs.
What attracted me to this new faith? I love the Baha'i concept of the oneness of mankind and the plan for universal peace among men, seeing a real harmony between science and religion, rather than having these two fields in opposition to each other. I believe in the equality of men and women. It means that my husband can do most of the cooking, and we can both voice our opinions freely, which we do. I often witness subtle and not so subtle prejudice. It can come in many forms, and in all cases, it hurts people. I love the idea of finding spiritual solutions to economic problems. Most importantly, I value unity between all people founded in profound respect for each other. Deep in my soul, these concepts of the Baha'i faith are both profound and true.
When Baha'u'llah was born, all the atoms in the earth began to vibrate at a higher level of energy. The realities of all created things are inebriated with the joy of this new and wondrous revelation. Now all the atoms of the earth have been illuminated for the brightness of its glory.
My son married a Baha'i named Sarah. I was deeply inspired by the spiritual way in which she lived, and I also was moved that my son had become Baha'i. So I began attending firesides and classes, and a few years later I found myself standing at the Green Lake Baha'i Conference and declaring my intentions to become a Baha'i. It changed my life. I now see how amazingly rich and blessed my life is and was, and am continually surprised that now I can feel and see the joy and love surrounding me in a way that I had never really experienced before. I continued my life with Stuart, both of us working together in a theater we bought to do service for the community by bringing diverse youth ages 6 through 20 together to create excellent theater productions and to teach life skills offstage. After I became a Baha'i, I gradually became transformed. I started to live with gratitude. I decided to dedicate the rest of my life to doing service for others, to turn my life over to God, not to judge others, and to use any gifts that I was so lucky to have been granted, to use those gifts for the benefit of others. And lastly, I decided I would truly love each person that I meet.
The spiritual expressions of the Baha'i faith have and will in the future raise and elevate human consciousness to a level that we cannot even imagine. If everything is in reality atoms and energy, then those who leave us are actually still with us. We are all constantly united.
As I continue to reflect on my husband's passing and on my connection to everything, to atoms, to energy, I feel happy. I know that he is with me and elsewhere at the same time, and that brings me peace. The last years of our marriage together were so much richer, occasionally fiery, but although people who observe us might not have seen the difference between us, there was a real difference.
We are taking time today to honor the twin manifestations, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, whose profound contributions to the world are helping us all evolve and vibrate at a higher level.
Abdul-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, wrote the following: "Love is the greatest law in this vast universe of God. Love is the one law that causeth and controlleth order among the existing atoms. Love is the universal magnetic power between the planets and stars, shining in the lofty firmament. Love is the cause of unfoldment to a searching mind of the secrets deposited by the universe, by the infinite. Love is the spirit of life in the bountiful body of the world."